souls, welcome back to my channel. Today's video I am doing a VR to Marlene Theresa here on YouTube. I'm really excited to do this tag. This is the Tarot Extremes tag, and like Marlene mentioned about being a Gemini, I am a Gemini sun, and this very much appeals to me. I feel as if I live in extremes. It's either like black or white. There's very little gray in my life. So I'm very excited to do this. If the angle or the lighting changes halfway through this video, I'm sorry. This is the second time I'm filming this beginning half because I filmed the whole thing yesterday and somehow half of the video disappeared. So if you guys are more into astrology than I am, please tell me what's going on in the universe to cause my technological difficulties that I've been having lately. So this is basically a tag. There's 7 prompts where you look at the extremes of things and you use your decks. So the first prompt is minimalist versus maximalist. Okay, so I have the Antique Anatomy Tarot for minimalist and I have the Revival Art Tarot for maximalist. All right, so let's talk about minimalist for a second. So I thought this deck was perfect for minimalist because it literally strips you down to your actual bones, and you can't get any more minimal than that. I'm sorry if you hear thunder in the background. It's a rainy, beautiful day here. So this is also the most pippish deck I have, and it's just so minimalistic. Some of them have more going on than others, but I just love it because it literally strips you down to as minimal as you can get. So I love it. I love the kind of cream space that you have here, this white space, and it's very much a palette cleanser for me. This again is one of the only pip decks I have. When you're looking at super illustrated decks, sometimes you need a palette cleanser. You need something that is less cluttered, and this is very much that for me, and it's beautiful. I love it, but it's very minimalistic. So that is the Antique Anatomy for my minimalist deck. And for my maximalist deck, I chose the Revival Art Tarot. And I chose this strictly for like aesthetic purposes. I've been actually looking into and been interested in maximalist kind of home decor lately, and kind of having that. I feel like that's more my style than like a minimalist art style. And this is just, I mean, it's full of opulence. Like everybody's just dressed to the nines. And I just feel like this embodies what maximalism is. I mean, look at this. Look at all this opulence and how they're dressed, and their horses are decorated, and I don't know, there's something about this kind of royal time that is very maximalist in my opinion. This isn't maximalist in the way of like learning, like it's not super hard to learn, or I mean, these are just curated paintings. It's pretty, I mean, it tries to follow the Rider-Waite pretty closely, but this is strictly for the style. It's very over the top, very maximalist, and the painting goes all the way to the edge. Like everything's colored, everything's filled in here. So I thought this was very much a maximalist deck. And yesterday when I was filming this video, I actually was looking at how these looked together, and I really, really liked it. These are ones that I never would have thought to put together, but I think they go pretty well. King of Swords and the Wheel of Fortune. Isn't that a two different sides of the spectrum there? So love these decks. So again, for my minimalist deck, I have the Antique Anatomy Tarot, and for my maximalist deck, I have the Revival Art Tarot. Okay, so the next prompt is daytime versus nighttime. Okay, so for daytime, I have my Pagan Otherworlds Tarot, and for nighttime, I have the Intuitive Night Goddess. So Pagan Otherworlds for daytime, this just feels like daytime. Even the cards that are supposed to be at night feel like daytime to me. There's something about this background color, it just makes it feel like when something is super bright and kind of blown out and overexposed. Part of this kind of reminds me of like a harsh kind of winter sun or like a midnight sun. It doesn't always give warm sun, but it does feel like daytime and daylight. Just because we kind of have this consistent art, this consistent coloring in the backgrounds, it very much feels like daytime to me, even if it's like overcast, because we do have lots of clouds in this. Yeah, I don't think of the nighttime when I think of this deck. Yeah, I was trying to find cards that are usually at night. Like this just feels like daytime. It feels like when the moon is out during the day. And here's the actual moon card, which is usually set at night, and again, it feels like daytime. So that is my daytime deck. My nighttime deck is pretty obvious. It's the Intuitive Night Goddess, and this deck is specifically set at night. It says it even in the guidebook that it's this night kind of garden, and you really get that feeling. I mean, you have like these planets coming out. You have this beautiful night sky in the background. And it just feels like night. It feels like night because things are kind of strange and things are ethereal and different. But I think it's interesting that the figures in this deck are very like illuminated, like you can see them very well. And so it makes you think, okay, are they being illuminated by the very bright moon? Are they being illuminated because they're in this weird ethereal liminal space? So I think that's really interesting. Like we have this nighttime feel, but we can also see everything. It's not kind of shrouded in darkness. So, and I mean, I adore this deck. It's so gorgeous. I just feel like I'm on a journey when I'm going through this deck and I'm meeting all these wonderful, interesting women, and I don't know, I just love it. So again, for my daytime deck, I have the Pagan Otherworlds, and for my nighttime deck, I have the Intuitive Night Goddess. All right, so the next prompt I have is best shuffle versus worst shuffle. Okay, so for the best shuffle, I have the Woodland Warden's Oracle, and for the worst shuffle, I have the Modern Witch Tarot. So this little oracle deck, I actually trimmed it. The shuffle is just so good on this. Like, it sounds wonderful. This isn't a tarot deck, but I just had to include it because it is my favorite deck to shuffle. If I'm just talking about tarot decks in general, I really love the Llewellyn cards. Like, they are the easiest to shuffle in my opinion. But I don't know, this cardstock's like so bendy and it's matte and it has a beautiful sound when you shuffle it. Oh, I love it. So this is published by, where did the box go? Andrew McNeil Publishing, and I only have one other deck by them, and is the Believe in Your Own Magic Oracle. And that one's bigger, so I didn't realize how beautiful it shuffles because it's a little harder to shuffle because of the size. This deck is gorgeous. I mean, the cardstock's this beautiful, like, swishy kind of matte. I love that sound. But it's super, like, bendy. And this is just a really, really pretty deck in general. I love the kind of illustration style. It feels very, like, storybook in a way, I suppose. But yeah, I love this deck. So that is the Woodland Wardens for my best. The worst shuffle, I had to pick Modern Witch. I mean, I don't know, there's something, and I'm talking about a deck a little bit later that's really hard to shuffle as well, but the cardstock itself isn't like horrible to deal with, and the whole tactile experience of this deck is just horrible. I mean, I don't know if you can see, like, look how chunky that is. It's just, I don't know, there's something about the like plasticness of this deck, and then the edges feel like papery and weird. I don't know, there's something, just when you have it in your hands, it doesn't feel right. It kind of hurts, like it's kind of sharp. And the artwork on this deck is some of my absolute favorite. I mean, I just love it. But I don't know, it's like I suggest this for a beginner deck all the time. And while it is beautiful to help you study if you're not into the like Pamela's artwork, the shuffleability of this is horrible. And so I don't want to suggest this for beginners, because then they'll have a hard time learning to shuffle, or they'll think that all decks are hard to shuffle like this, and that's not the case. And so I'm just stuck in this place. Like, I love the artwork and I love the witchiness of this deck, because I think a deck that I might get to kind of compare with this, because it's modern, and when I'm doing readings for others, sometimes I have the urge to pull out a modern deck, even though I barely have any. I'm thinking of getting the Good Karma because it has better card stock, and it's still like that modern aesthetic, but I just love how RWS this one is, and I also love that witchy aspect. And so I'm just sad that I never get this out because of the physical experience I have with it. And again, there are decks that I have in my collection that I will like split to do shuffling with, which you can do with this one. But I guess it's just the actual feel of the cardstock itself is what holds me back, because it's not pleasing to touch. So I don't know, when I want an RWS deck, I'll just use my regular RWS deck that's easy to shuffle, because I feel like when you're doing a reading, you have to get a good shuffle in. Like, at least for me, having a good shuffle just makes the reading that much better, in my opinion. So yeah, as much as I love the artwork on this, this is my worst shuffle. So for my best shuffle, again, I have Woodland Wardens Oracle, and my worst shuffle, I have the Modern Witch Tarot. All right, the next prompt is Confronting versus Comforting. Okay, so for Confronting, I have the Everyday Witch Tarot, and for Comforting, I have the Green Witch Tarot. And I think it's so funny that these are going head to head, because they have very similar subjects, and they're similar in art style, but for me, the energy of these decks is completely opposite. And I am somebody who works with the energy of my decks and how they feel to me. And I do feel as if they have like their own personality sometimes. And it's just funny that these are going head to head. So for my most confronting deck, it's this one. This deck, it's so confronting to me, and I think there's something about the artwork being kind of my aesthetic and my cup of tea that kind of makes it worse. I feel like I hear a lot of times people talk about really scary decks or gory decks or whatever, and how they're confronting to them, and that's not the case for me. I have loved scary movies since I was a kid. I watch super gory movies. I love that thing. I love scary, spooky, horrific things. And so artwork like that doesn't really have that effect on me in the way that I feel like this does. Again, I feel like because it's something that I love the artwork on so much, and then for it to speak to me in such like a stern kind of a tone, it's very confronting in that way. This is the deck I go to for like adult shadow work. Like if I'm trying to work on myself, my current adult self, this is what I'll pull out, because it'll tell me exactly what I need to hear, even if it's not what I want to hear. Most of the shadow work I do is related to inner child work, but this one is very much what I pull out when I need a stern talking to, or I need to kind of be told how it is. The amount of times I've gotten the 10 of Wands and the 10 of Swords out of this deck is ridiculous. I find the energy when I'm working with it for other people is quite comforting, but for me, it's very confronting. It's very, just the messages I get from it and how I interpret the cards and what, in the context of what I'm asking, it's very much a confronting deck. The artwork is not confronting. The artwork is welcoming and beautiful and comforting. And I think that is kind of what makes it super, super confronting for me, is like it's kind of wrapped in this pretty package, but in this cute package, but that's not really what's beneath the surface. It's very cutthroat for me and the messages I get from it. So I think it's a beautiful deck. I love the artwork on it. I've tried to kind of build a better relationship with it. That's not quite so harsh, and we're working on it. So I absolutely love this deck. And it is my most confronting deck. And on the complete other side of that, we have my most comforting deck, which is the Green Witch Tarot. And this deck is the complete opposite. When I want to feel empowered, when I want to feel comforted, when I want to feel like there's a light at the end of the tunnel, this is the deck I go to. And it has that beautiful witchy energy, and actually more so, like, I love the world building that this kind of gives. It has its own energy and its own place that it resides in, and the everyday witch has kind of modern aspects to it, which can pull me out of that world. This one is just everything I've wanted or will ever want in a witchy tarot deck. Like, it's beautiful. You can read this in harsh ways as well, and I have done that, but the energy of this deck, again, because I very much feel the energy from my decks, is comforting in every way. It feels like a cozy autumn night and everything is right with the world. Like, that's what it feels like to me. So I think it's very interesting that these decks, to some, that may seem very similar, but to me they are just completely used for different things. So that is the Everyday Witch and the Green Witch, and I mean, these do go well together visually. They have a very similar art style. So if you wanted to pair them, they would go well together. So again, that is my confronting deck with the Everyday Witch and my comforting deck with the Green Witch. Okay, the next category is an everyday deck versus an every so often deck. All right, so for my everyday deck, I have this Pamela Coleman Smith Tarot, which is basically an RWS, and then I have my every so often deck, which is the Ancestral Path Tarot. So let's talk about my everyday deck here. So this is just a RWS clone. It's my favorite at the moment. The shuffle on this could have gone in best shuffle too, but it's so easy to pull out and just have an easy message with. I think any of my just plain RWS decks are an everyday deck. The shuffleability of this one and just the tactile experience makes it kind of the front runner of my everyday decks right now. But if I want a quick message and I don't want to have to sit and ponder and I just want clear answers to something, this is what I would take out on the daily basis. I mean, this is what I resort to when I just want answers and I want to know the scope of a situation. This is the most trusted deck for me. I find it never to be wrong. And so, yes, this is an everyday deck for me. I'm a big RWS person. Like, I love Pam's artwork. I think it's beautiful. And I've heard people talk about this sort of recently, and I thought it was really interesting that the collective kind of meanings to the cards and the collective kind of experience with these cards really adds to the messages and adds to the clarity and the accuracy of this deck, I suppose. And I mean, it's beautiful. It has this kind of vintagey look to it. I love that it's like faded. And yeah, these RWS, this one and my other one, they never steer me wrong. And so this is an everyday deck for me. For any situation, it's like the deck to end all decks, in my opinion. So now, for every so often, I have the Ancestral Path, and this was going to be in my worst shuffle, but the actual cardstock itself is not bad. It's not super thick. It's just that the cards themselves are huge. Like, look at the difference on that. And that's what makes it harder to shuffle, but I actually can get a ripple shuffle out of this deck, as large as it is. And the Everyday Witch, I just can't. So the reason this is an every so often deck for me is partly because of the size and then partly because of the deep messages that you get with it. I use this for ancestor work. I use this in my ancestor readings that I do in my Etsy shop. And it has this ancestral energy to it, which I feel like isn't something that you necessarily want to tap into every day, or it can be a lot for some people. And so that's why it's an every so often deck. For me, if this deck was in a smaller size, I would use it more often, and I feel it could become an everyday deck, something to infuse this ancestral energy into your everyday life. But right now, because of how huge these cards are, I just can't see myself using it on a daily basis comfortably, and like, yeah, it kind of puts me off of that. So I don't know, this is one, and I've talked about doing this with the Modern Witch, is somehow trying to take pictures of these and print them myself so that I can use it, because the imagery on this and the feelings I get from this deck are just beautiful. And yeah, I wish it was smaller so I could use it more, but for right now, this is an every so often kind of a deck. All right, so for my everyday deck, we have the Pamela Coleman Smith's Tarot, RWS, and for the every so often, I have the Ancestral Path Tarot. All right, next up we have Overrated versus Underrated. So, okay, so for Overrated, I've chosen the Tarot of the Divine, and for Underrated, I chose the Halloween Tarot, and we'll get into my reasoning in a minute. So for the Overrated, I chose the Tarot of the Divine, and I actually, I was inspired to pick this from Tarot with Ruby. I love her channel, so definitely check her out. But I was looking at my decks and I was like, what do I have that's overrated? Like, I feel like if it's too overrated or I don't like it, then I move it on, you know what I mean? But this is definitely one that fits in that category. It's one that I actually picked up before I was part of TarotTube, or I knew anything about like the tarot community. I saw it at Barnes & Noble and I read the box and I was like, that sounds like something, you know, like my tarot deck to end all decks, you know. And it was one of the very few first decks that I ever purchased. And I mean, opening it, I was like, this artwork is stunning and it's so beautiful. But then as I started to learn tarot, I realized that this is a little bit this is not for beginners, at least in my opinion. There's so much depth and story to these cards that it's hard to just look at this as a beginner and be able to read tarot. As somebody who knows tarot now, I can relate my tarot knowledge to these cards quite easily without knowing the stories. But as a beginner, it was not a good deck. And as I got onto TarotTube, I realized that everybody was talking about this deck. Like, this was just such an overrated deck. And now I feel like I never see it in anybody's like favorites or anybody talking about it as a deck that they use on the regular. So I definitely feel like that's an overrated deck. One that everybody was praising, and then now nobody really uses as a in their practice all the time. So yeah, as beautiful. I mean, I don't think the artwork is overrated or the beauty of the deck is overrated. I guess I just think the like usability of the deck was overrated. It's not, again, not good for beginners, and it's something you have to like buy an extra book for, because the guidebook that comes with it is not super descriptive of these folktales that are described. So yes, overrated. I still really like this deck and I'm going to keep it in my collection, but definitely overrated. Okay, underrated. Let's talk about this. So I know some of you might be like, what? Everybody likes that deck. This is a Halloween tarot. And I do think this is popular around Halloween time, and a lot of people have this deck. But I feel like a lot of people don't talk about this deck any other time than Halloween, which is fine. I get it. But I feel like this deck is so much more than that. And I feel like a lot of people think of this deck as very kitschy or very like cheesy. But the guidebook's actually quite good for this. And it's not super cheesy. It actually has very deep meanings. And it helped me in my tarot journey to actually learn tarot. And I'm taught, so I got the kit with the big book, so that's the book I'm talking about. I haven't really looked at the little white book, so I'm not sure about that. But I don't know, there's something about this deck that is so beautiful, and I love using this. This gives very good readings. It gives the same kind of readings that I would get from an RWS like deck, or very clear readers. And it's I find with RWS, I think the reason I love reading with it so much is because I find it very neutral, like a deck with this artwork, not like a clone. If some decks I find lean towards either the light in the situation or the dark in the situation, and I find with my RWS decks that they're very neutral, and I can kind of work with the energy and see which way the reading is leaning, and it's not always dark or always light depending on the deck that you use. This one, I feel, again, is very neutral. It seems cutesy and whatever, but you can get a very well-rounded reading out of this. And I think it's wonderful and beautiful. And of course, for me, Halloween time, that time of year, and autumn for me are such a beautiful healing energy. And I feel most at home at that time. It's my favorite, absolute favorite time of year. I love the decor that comes out during that time because it's very my style. And so this deck to me is just, it's one of my absolute favorites. And it's very RWS, so this is beautiful for beginners to learn. If you don't necessarily like the RWS decks and you want something that has different imagery, this is a beautiful alternative if you were into this kind of artwork. But I just feel that this deck, I don't know, to me, when I bring this out other times than Halloween, it brings that magic that I feel for Halloween. Plus just, I mean, it's a beautiful reading deck, but it also brings that magic in. And so I don't know, I just feel like this is underrated for any other time than Halloween. Like, everyone just only talks about this at Halloween, but I think it's a really, really beautiful deck and I love it. I'm actually thinking of buying another copy, and because I trimmed this, it had white borders around it, and I'm thinking of buying another copy and actually lining the borders in black, which I've seen done. But if you guys know anybody who's done that and like filmed how they did it, please let me know, because I'm assuming they just like taped it off and then like colored it in with Sharpie. but I don't know. If anybody knows of somebody who did that to their deck and like filmed it, please let me know. So for overrated, I have Tarot of the Divine, and for my underrated, I chose the Halloween Tarot. Okay, last prompt is light work versus shadow work. Okay, I actually kind of cheated for this one and I used oracle decks, but yeah, they're just what fit for me for this category. So light work, I have the Seasons of the Witch Samhain, and for shadow work, I have the Fairies Oracle. Yes, I said that correctly. I did not switch them up. So let's talk about light work for a minute. So I feel like my definition of this kind of is different than what Marlene said, and I don't know, it was more like in the everyday or not going super deep. But when I think of light work as kind of the opposite of shadow work, I think of still deep work, but bringing you back to the light, bringing you back to the now and focusing on the now and being happy and focusing on good aspects of yourself that maybe need to be brought out. And that can be shadow work as well. But that's just kind of what I thought of when I was thinking of light work. And while this deck is very shadowy, like I said, the darker type decks don't have, I don't know, they don't work for shadow work for me. It's decks like this that work for shadow work. So this deck brings me back to the light. It helps me focus on my strengths, and it reminds me that I'm this powerful witch, and it's the fact that there's things that exist like this in life. It brings me so much happiness, and this could be in like the good mood decks as well if I did that tag, which I don't know if I'm going to do it or not, maybe. But the beauty and the healing I get from this deck, I guess, which shadow work is meant to help you heal as well, but this just feels like a light work deck for me when I'm trying to do that kind of high vibe energy healing. This is what I bring out. And again, I talked about how much I love Halloween and that dark part of the year and how that is where I really thrive. And so this is my light work deck. And so for my shadow work deck, it's very much the opposite of that. This is a very cutesy. Okay, I'm sorry if the angle changed. My storage is running out. Anyways, this is a very cutesy kind of artwork deck, but it's super confronting to me. And when I do shadow work and a lot of inner work like that, it is related to my inner child, and this brings out a lot of those wounds. And it's a very healing too. I feel like that fairy energy that is infused to this deck brings out these harsh truths or these hard things to kind of digest, or things that you've hidden away, and but it heals you at the same time. It helps you with those. And so this deck has made me cry like a little baby. And I mean, it's just funny. Again, I feel like with kind of this artwork, and it's not just tarot extremes, it's tarot opposites for me in a lot of aspects. So yes, so that is my light work deck in the Seasons of the Witch Samhain, and my shadow work deck with the Fairies Oracle. All right, guys, so that was my tarot extremes tag. I really hope you enjoyed. This was really fun for me to do. If you've done this tag, please let me know so I can watch the video, because I've been having so much fun watching people's videos. And yeah, I love you guys so much. I hope you're having a magical week wherever you are, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye.